Okay, greetings everybody. Who have we got in the chat? Tavares, Jennifer, Imperfect Canvas, Steve, Robert, and Sharon, Marion, Marcus, Noel, Alex, Steve, Dr. Music Star, and on it goes. And those who haven't put their name in the chat, welcome again to another session. It's the sun's just coming up here, as you can see, so it might be, I don't know if my camera's okay. I think there's enough light so that you can see me. I'm also using a slightly different mic today, so I'm hoping that I'm only joking. I'm hoping that the sound's okay. So I know there's people out there. Sound is good, great. And you can see me. Hi, Mark Jones. So it's funny, these live streams, isn't it? Or maybe it's not funny for you. It's funny for me because I'm basically just sitting in my little hut talking to a screen, and I have a list of names, a sense that there's people out there. And yeah, it's worth reflecting on that too, in terms of perceptions, in terms of Dharma, that I'm relating to some perceptions of people out there, names, some faces, some little symbols, and really I'm just talking to myself. So at one level, I'm just sitting in my hut, having had a morning drink. The birds are starting to wake up. The sun's starting to rise. And we have this strange thing that's been invented where we have an opportunity to connect. But you can see me, I can't see you. You can hear me, I can't hear you, apart from a few letters that are typed on the screen. So how do I perceive you? How do you perceive me? You get more information, I suppose, but is it really information about me? Or is it just more, well, it's certainly more information about the senses, for the senses, the seeing, the hearing, and then you build a picture, an image, you have an emotional reaction, physiological reaction to what's called Jayasara, and how that impacts you. But it's your own perception, so that everyone will perceive me differently, have a different view, a different opinion, a different idea. So which one's the real me? And who are these people with names? So when I say your name, like Tony or Elizabeth, you go, oh yeah, that's me. It's good to work with that as part of and I'm sure you're all doing that as part of this journey inwards, this notion that my name gives me a sense of who I am. My physical appearance gives me a sense of who I am. My voice gives me a sense of who I am. But who is this? It changes all the time. You know, you might think I have a consistent voice, but if you listen to my recordings, the voice always sounds different. There's some continuity, I suppose. Similarly, with this physical body keeps changing. The thoughts keep changing. Things keep changing around me. So there's all these different perceptions, and I think people's names on YouTube keep changing too. I think YouTube forces people to keep changing the way the monikers come up now, isn't it? I don't know what happens. So who are we? That's the question. And Ajahn Sumedho has a really lovely saying. I often take it with me. It kind of relates to what I'm saying. He says, you know, when we're traveling, when we're moving, going different places, becoming different people, you know, as we move through the world, he says that no one ever really goes anywhere. There's just changing perceptions. And if you think of this, when you go to another country, you think you're going somewhere, but you're never really going anywhere. Yeah, at the depth, you know, we're always, the essence is always where it is in this moment, wherever that is. It's not really a place. It's not really a person. It's not really a space. So anyway, that's just a bit of a morning reflection whilst we're getting ready for some meditation time. So please settle yourself wherever you are in the world. Here it's a little bit cold. Other parts of the world I hear are very, very hot. So we've got these extremes at each end of the pole at the moment. And maybe some people are kind of somewhere in the middle. So wherever we are, it doesn't matter. Wherever we go, it's just changing perceptions. So let us begin the meditation, because I think we've allowed enough time for people to connect. And if you'd like to keep your eyes closed for this, it's fine. If you'd like to practice the gazing, just find a place. I haven't got my bell ready, but anyway, you can gaze maybe downwards. Okay, and we can just leave the comments now, although people who join some people let us know. But anyway, we can just turn away from any distractions now. This is an opportunity, and this is why we offer these meditations as an opportunity in real time or recorded time, if you're joining later, to just stop and be. And how rare that is in the world these days, except for when people go to sleep, to just slow down and stop. So now I just invite you all to settle into physical stillness. As you settle and stop, you might notice, become aware of things still moving internally and externally. In my case, the world is very still and quiet at the moment. Provides a lovely opportunity just to notice how quiet the world is in the early hours of the morning on a weekend. No one's rushing. No one's moving. The birds even seem quite reluctant to move this morning as the sun hasn't pierced through the clouds. So these early mornings or these late nights are a real gift to tuning into the silence and the stillness. It's actually always there, but obscured by so much frenetic activity in the world. Just tune into that stillness and that silence. Even as things arise and fall within it. The sound of my voice, the sound of your own inner voice. Becoming sensitive to your own breathing. As it rises and falls, as you inhale and exhale, just like a gentle wave in this vast ocean of stillness. Allowing whatever comes to come and whatever goes to go. We don't have any contention any resistance to anything. What does that feel like? Not to resist anything, to demand anything. To want anything. Such that we're like a big open field, or a wide ocean if you prefer that metaphor, or a sky. Anything, everything can come. And it is its nature that it naturally dissolves into this wide open field. So you're sitting here, you can call it meditation or practicing meditation. But really, you're just sitting here with absolutely no agenda. Not trying, not expecting to get anything. Not resisting. Just noticing. Simply witnessing. Whatever comes. Watching it dissolve. Can you sense the still point in all of these movements? Whether internal or external, so called. you might have a perception of it as being like the center or the still point in the eye of a hurricane, the eye of the storm. Can you locate that, even though in essence it's non-locatable? We can intuit it. In some traditions, they refer to it as the heart. Can you rest into your own heart? That still point. That still point doesn't really have anything to say. The silence is really its most authentic language. And you have to know this for yourself. That still point doesn't have any views or opinions, likes or dislikes. No desires. Because resting within it brings complete relief. It quenches all desires. When we rest back into this, and if certain desires pop up in the mind, it has no inclination to run after them, as it's completely satiated, content just to rest here. nothing worth thinking about, nothing to do, nowhere to go. And no one to be as a perception. You become like a rock. Firmly placed in your own place, where nothing touches you. Things still come and go, but they don't sway you. Just like that eye of the hurricane. Everything swirling around. And yet there's something deep, deep within the center that remains untouched. So this is all our practice. Is intended to do. Just to help us come back to this. Learn to recognize the still point. And that's a little easier to do when we sit in stillness and stop the movement. But as we practice, we can recognize a still point, even in the midst of movement. Nothing changes. It's just changing perceptions, as we mentioned before. And even if you have the highest peak experiences of bliss or love or ecstasy, or the deepest hell of pain, fear, terror, or grief, guess what? That still point doesn't move. The highs come and go. The lows come and go. None of these ecstatic experiences are permanent. None of the visits to hell are permanent. But the still point is the only constant in, in all of those experiences. So it's the only thing you can rely upon. And this is why the Buddha said to make this Dharma, this truth, your refuge or your island in the midst of a tumultuous sea of samsara. No teacher, no guru, no drug, no peak experience can either give you this or guarantee that it will be yours for good. They merely point to it. So we stop looking outside. We stop looking for external things to reveal reality. And we simply just come home to what is so natural, so obvious. and what it might appear nothing special starts to reveal itself more and more as we keep shedding. We shed all the layers of confusion, attachment, identification. All the running, and just stop. And when we really stop, completely stop, then we drop. We drop deeper and deeper down. Or as Ramana says, we're pulled deep into the current. Where we actually have no control. We've let go of the controller. And we're just pulled deep into the stillness. And it all just happens. Recognizing that there's no one making it happen. Other than the power of wisdom and love itself. So when you feel ready, you can just slowly come out from the meditation, but recognizing that even though the perceptions are changing, you might be taking in visuals, more sounds, awareness of sounds, or moving the body. Nothing really changes at the deepest level. That still point is always there. So if people have any questions, related to that meditation or beyond, just take a little time. Just while we're waiting for some questions, I just mentioned that the Buddha Dharma series is continuing. If you aren't aware of it or haven't joined, you can find it under the playlist. So Aya Jatindriya, a fortnight ago, did the second session. So these are happening every 6 weeks. You can find the dates in the playlist, and encourage you to listen, participate if you can, live. And if you're interested in early Buddhism, and not just the theory of it either, she's making it much more, I'd say, accessible, drawing out some nuances that you often don't get. So it's she's speaking from her practice and insight, but giving you a very clear model of what the Buddha taught based on the early suttas. Okay, let me go back and find some questions. So Jennifer says, there is the odd bird call in your space. Yeah, they're very quiet this morning. Why, birdies? I don't know. Maybe they're all meditating. Normally the magpies are going for it, but we had a big wind yesterday and now it's really calm. So maybe they're like, oh, finally. But I guarantee as soon as the sun's coming up a little bit, they'll start. Okay, and they are quite a joy, more than a joy to have. So Antony, if I pronounced that right, enjoyed the meditation and felt peace. Very nice. Okay, so Amilof has asked, how does one stay in that beautiful place while working in the world? So you might have noticed with that meditation, things are still moving even while you're sitting. And sometimes even when you're sitting, it's trying to so-called sit still, things can move even more. You can notice the internal movement. And if there's been a few things that have triggered you, you can have like a lot of internal storms. And so even when things are moving, it's really a matter of recognizing. And the more you practice recognizing it, sitting in a formal meditation, the more natural it becomes that you start to recognize it when you're engaging. But a couple of, I guess, simple things you could do, if you're at work and people are talking in your head and there's music playing or people shouting or trucks going, whatever, is just to take a few deep conscious breaths. And that brings us back to it, So just that very act of breathing and noticing, because you've got to have a bit of, I guess, trust. And trust only comes when you learn to recognize it. It's always there. So a few deep breaths, come back to center. For some people, they might have a mantra they say, Om Mani Padme Om, or something they've created themselves, be here now, recognize the stillness. You can use little prompts, things like that, particularly in the early stages, it's like an alarm bell, it's a wake-up call, come back. But even noticing when you are caught up in the craziness out there, just that mere act of noticing, okay, I'm triggered, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling stressed, just that mere act of noticing, because that's what you're practicing, will automatically bring you back to the still point. So you're not saying, I'm stressed and I'm just going to keep going with the stress and act out of the stress. The practice is to notice, okay, there's some suffering going on here, some reactivity. Wake up, notice, and do what works for you. I mean, we can't always, when we're at work or out in the world, take ourselves away to a quiet room. That would be nice, but we can't. So we have to be creative here and do what works for you. But as long as it's natural, so we're not medicating ourselves to deal with the stress. We're not taking something externally, drinking, shopping. We're not using those sort of unskillful things that people use to numb the pain and the stress. We're just willing to be with it. So I guess one last thing is to say is don't resist it. Whatever happens in the world, don't see it as a problem. See it as an opportunity to wake up and work with it. So it's like, okay, it's crazy in here. There's so much noise. There's so much movement. People are angry. Thank you. This is my practice. How do I find the still point? So if we change the attitude from there's a problem that the world's crazy to the world's crazy and it gives me an opportunity to not be crazy, to wake up out of it. It changes the whole paradigm, doesn't it? Okay, so I'm glad it took you right down and in, Marion. It was just, I had some ideas about what I might speak of this morning, and you know what? None of that came out. That's what I love about, this is the way in our tradition we're taught to teach. We're not really taught. That's the thing. It's like just speak from the heart and don't go in with a script or a plan. And that can be really scary sometimes if, in the monasteries they're asked to get up on the seat and give a 1 hour Dharma talk. No script, no ideas, try not to go in. And it's like, oh, I don't know what's going to come up. But when you trust that, then you speak to the moment, trusting that you're speaking to what needs to be said, what's going to be most helpful, rather than, I've crafted a very good script here and I've done all my research on meditation and mindfulness practice and I'm going to polish it up and I'm going to deliver it like a pro. Ajahn Chah used to chuck those sort of people out. Not literally, but just would say, chuck that stuff out. So, I thought I might talk about, I don't know, just have little ideas. Maybe we'll look at thoughts today, but it didn't happen. It just came from that. So it might have worked for some, may not have worked for others, but that's okay. So Christy says, near that still point, I find a space of feeling bad or shameful. Can you speak on this if it makes sense? Yes, it does make sense. If I can, things move here. Sorry. I have to go back. Okay, so that's Christy. Near that still point, I find a space of feeling bad or shameful. So this is the thing about a willingness to stop. Most people in the world aren't willing to stop and be still, because when we stop and be still, you may have all noticed, I'm sure you've all noticed, you start to feel things that may not be all that pleasant. And, this really depends on our own journey, our own karma, our own experiences. So some people stop and the first thing they feel coming up is a lot of agitation or anger or fear. And so, I'm not doing that. I can't do meditation. And they'll make all excuses. In your case, you started to feel some old feelings of shame or guilt or, self-blame. This is good. This is exactly the territory that we all need to navigate. So there's a few things to recognize that when we stop with all the distractions and the movement, we're not automatically going to go into a place of bliss. Maybe sometimes it happens for some people. But even if it happens the first time, I guarantee it's not going to happen again. So it's recognizing that part of this journey, Ayurveda often mentions to me that, it really is a psycho-spiritual journey, because we have this notion that the spiritual is outside the psychological work, and it's not. It's all part of the whole. So when we do meditate, and some people would like to bypass that, by the way, and forget about the psychological or just dismiss it. And when I say the psychological, I mean all the emotional traumas and pain. But they're part and parcel of this human experience and part and parcel of this spiritual practice. So you don't bypass them by just forcing the breath to stay on the mind and getting into some jhanic states. And some people try to do that or can do that. But often it's what's called, spiritual bypassing the human experience and what needs to be processed or just felt and let go of, to keep it simple. Because when I say process, I don't mean you have to go into therapy for 20 years. It's really a matter of allow whatever comes to come. And that's what I said in the meditation. So whatever comes, I feel fear, I feel self-hatred, I feel blame, I feel shame. Let it come. Be willing to feel it, be with it, not analyze it, not justify it, not go into the storyline. Maybe there's a place for the storyline later if you're working in therapy or doing some other work. But for meditation, the recommend, and this is the power of it too, just feel it in the body. Okay, what does it feel like? Again, without over-analyzing what it feels like. Just feel it. One is feeling heavy, sad, pain in the stomach, tension in the neck. What is the bodily felt sense of it? Breathe with it. The still point is there. It is there. Try to recognize that as you don't resist. Let it come. And the really powerful healing that takes place, or transformation, if you want to call it that, with a genuine spiritual practice, not just one where you're kind of looking for hits and highs and other things, but a deep, genuine spiritual practice is that you start to recognize, I was calling it the still point in that meditation. It's just another name for awareness. When you recognize your awareness and the power of awareness to actually transform that whole landscape, that psycho-spiritual landscape, it does. That's the power of it. But I can say that you have to try it out for yourself and experience that. So it takes the kind of pressure off you thinking that you have to do something to get rid of these negative feelings, what we call negative feelings, painful feelings. Got to work it all out, got to figure it out with our heads or do some clever thing internally. It's nothing clever. Let go of clever. Really, the transformative healer comes when we're just willing to, and I'll put it very simply, let what comes come, be with it, feel it, let it go. Because if you can let it come within the space of the awareness, not losing touch with the still point, you notice, oh, I'm not reacting to it. I'm not pushing it away. I'm not pulling it in and starting with more and more analysis of my story. I'm just watching it, and it naturally dissolves by itself. It's like magic, It's like I didn't do anything, but you feel layers are starting to shed. Okay, layers of pain. You start to feel lighter. You start to feel clearer. You start to feel more peace, and you think, how'd that happen? I didn't do anything. I just stayed with something painful without pushing or pulling. That's it in a nutshell. Just don't push or pull. Just be the witness, be the observer. And I like a lot of the teachers talk about the analogy of like being an old man watching children play. You know, if you can be like that with your own internal drama, your own internal landscape of pain or pleasure, because people get lost in pleasure too and puffed up with their own sense of self and pride. But an old man watching children play, you know, he knows what's going on. He knows all the silly games they play. But I say that in a nice old man way. He's not condescending. But he doesn't get involved, and they're crying and they're fighting and they're believing that the sandcastles are real and this is my kingdom. And he just looks on with kindness, not involved, and knows at the end of the day the children go home. So be like that with these feelings of shame or feeling bad. They're not you and yours. They're just a dream. And the wise old man, wise old woman within you, the sage, is the still point. Okay. So I hope some of that was helpful for you, Christy, and for everyone, because, you know, it's what we're all navigating. Okay, so someone says that a single tear left my lacrimal gland. Is that the gland where the tear ducts come? Midway through, not sure why it came, but was as nourishing as your words. Lovely. Exactly. Things open up and release and as they need. You know, we don't expect anything and these things happen naturally. So that's lovely. So Michelle has said, thank you so much for this channel. I have always heard that you can't have a proper practice without a teacher. I have no teacher and no prospects of having one. What to do? Well, you do have a teacher. They're everywhere and everyone is your teacher. And we have this idea that a teacher is someone who says, I'm a teacher, I'm a guru, and I've got a following and everyone's recognized me. And they bow at my feet, and I was reborn because I'm special, some high lama, you know, and I've got special powers. So that's the teacher. As you can probably hear by my sarcasm, I'm not saying they're not teachers. Some of them aren't, of course. Some of them are frauds. But that's not only what a teacher is. So, you know, we have to go beyond the superficial, the childish understandings here in spiritual practice. And I guess in the olden days, it was a different thing. You know, there weren't many people. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't a lot of people interested in spirituality at some level because they were all just busy trying to survive. So a person, if they were going to leave the family home, you know, what do you call it? The family life, the family composition, it was a big deal, you know, because the families always stuck together, the extended families, to survive. And if you were to leave it, it was a big deal. So if you were to leave it, you know, you were quite rare, and you'd go off and you'd find a teacher. It wasn't that hard to do, perhaps, you know, and you'd only find them within a certain radius within your own community. So it started out traditionally like that. So I'm not criticizing those traditional guru teacher roles, but the world's changed. Families have changed, particularly in the West. People are much more sophisticated intellectually now. It's okay. We're allowed to adapt and change and shift. But even those teachers of old, someone like Adi Shankara, I think it was Adi Shankara, correct me if I'm wrong somewhere in the comments, but anyway. No, Dattatreya, sorry. It talked about, he didn't have a physical guru. He had what was called his 24 gurus. And if there's a reading of that on my channel, Michelle, so I'd recommend you listen to it. It's called The 24 Gurus of Dattatreya. And he said his gurus were things like birds, the four elements, earth, water, fire, and other sort of archetypal things, and he learnt from that. And he was a master. He was an awakened master, and he just, what did he do? He applied his mind. He looked, he investigated into things, and he realized that, and this is true, you know, if you've really felt this sometime, the world is teaching us, believe it or not. The Dharma is there teaching us in every moment. Sometimes it appears for those who need it as a physical guru who says, I'm a guru. And the person agrees, oh, yes, you're a guru. For other people, they realize that it goes beyond that superficial appearance, that teaching and teachers, everything and everyone in the world is a teacher teaching us to wake up. Until you realize that, you'll go looking for a teacher and believing that's the only way you're going to move on your spiritual practice. But even, you know, our teacher in our tradition, we called him a teacher. He said that everything is Dharma, everything is teaching you, and he didn't want people to rely on him as the sole authority. He said, look at your reaction to the hot weather. Hot weather's a great teacher. Look at your reaction to pain, the best teacher. Look at your reaction and attachments to pleasure, a wonderful teacher. Okay? So our own body, mind is our best teacher. And then everything in nature is teaching us. It's something you can learn every minute about. Not so much, yes, of course, yourself, but everything about Dharma is taught, is contained within the universe and with everything in the universe. So that's all I've got to say. So don't believe that you don't have a teacher. As soon as you leave this session, you'll start to realize, oh, everything is teaching me. Okay. Okay, glad you enjoyed it too, Tony. Okay, so Rick said, really enjoyed the still point conversation. It wasn't really a conversation. It's a reflection, I hope. Ajahn Lee says, we should go from intention and attention to no intention or attention. The Buddha in the Digha Nikaya called it freedom from clinging aggregates. Great. Yeah, so Rick's just pointing to the fact that, eventually we let go of this agency. We start off, in a slightly dualistic way of thinking there's, I have to meditate. I'm doing it. I'm being attentive. I'm directing my attention, to realizing that, oh, it's all just happening. And when we apply attention, it's just a natural thing that starts to happen. And the sense of agency or the sense of self dissolves around that. And something, as I said in that meditation, something else takes over. That's, let's not give it a name or self it, but we recognize there's a certain, it's like we plug into a power source and it just comes. And like I said, things happen. We didn't do it. It just happens. It's the magic of Dharma. Okay, so Born in Washing Machine says, is the meditation like self-inquiry? Do you mean that meditation? Or any? How to get into a deep level of meditation emptiness? Well, the first thing to do is not want to get anything. That's what I was trying to say in that meditation. Let go of wanting to get emptiness, to wanting to get high, to wanting to get still, to wanting to get nothing. Just let go. Because it's the wanting or the trying to figure out how to do anything that's coming from things aren't right here, therefore I've got to do something to get away from it. It's that meditation was simply stay where you are and watch things swirl around you and recognize that where you are is where you've always been and will always be. Okay? Nothing to do, nothing to get, no one to be. Perhaps write that as your mantra. nothing to do, nothing to get, no one to be. How does that feel? It's like, phew, that's a relief. Okay, I rock. Rock. Who's that? Time for rock and roll. How much of Nisargadatta is in Buddhism? Well, it depends whether you believe there's a Nisargadatta and whether you believe there's a Buddhism, Robert and Sharon. They're just concepts. Truth is the truth. Nisargadatta speaks the truth from his direct experience. The Buddha spoke the truth from direct experience. But the Buddha didn't create Buddhism. That came later as a religion. So the Buddha isn't Buddhism. They're both, you could say they're both awake. That's what they have in common. And they speak differently, which is lovely, you know. The Buddha taught a particular framework, very clear, very rational, very direct, from that was appropriate to his audience. And Nisargadatta just shut up to his audience. If you ever watch videos of Nisargadatta, he doesn't speak like I read him. And I have no idea what he's saying because I don't speak Marathi. But he is a character full of life, full of energy. And he, you know, his personality was a product of his conditions, as it is for all of us. But did he pierce through the veils and with such great clarity and knowledge, you know, amazing. Okay, so Bobby says, how can I identify less with perceiving? Good question. There's a lovely direct teaching that the Buddha gave, and I'll just keep this short then. So he said, in the hearing, let there be only the hearing. In the seeing, let there be only the seeing. In the perceiving, let there be only the perceiving. Now, if you just reflect on that, not now necessarily, I mean, you can a bit, but take that into your meditation. It's really just saying you're noticing things without it being my idea or my perception. I see a thing, it's not my wife, my husband. I just see a person, and they're not even a person, just seeing, hearing, and to turn the mind towards just noticing. First, you'll notice all the labels. So you've got to start by first noticing how many layers and layers and layers of labels, concepts, views, opinions, judgments, likes, dislikes there are before we get to just bare awareness or bare perceiving. But I think just simply how to identify less is just to notice the identities first. Oh, look, I think this is me. I like this. I don't like this. So you notice all the ways we preference what we perceive. And this all comes from lifetimes and this lifetime of conditioning. You know, I perceive a woman this way, I perceive a man this way. If they're such and such, I like. If they're that way, I don't like. If they're this shape, this color, this size, I don't like. Or I judge, they're like this. So we just got to notice all the labels first and how it blocks. You know, when we just walk around the world with all this heavy conditioning and ways of perceiving, it blocks connection and it blocks reality. And we relate to people through perceptions and labels rather than that which is much deeper and goes beyond that. So we can only shed these identities with perceptions when we just start to notice them, and then noticing, let them go. They let go themselves. So John says, is the still point another way of looking at resting in open awareness? Is it an internal place that you can cultivate? Yes, yes, and no. Yes, 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 and no. So yeah, it's another way of just saying rest in open awareness. And I don't know where still point came from this morning. It just came. But sometimes different ways of expressing things or using different words can spark something for people, just a new way. Because, if we keep using the same words all the time, we just think we understand or we switch off. So sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, I get it. I finally get it. It's a new word, but it's actually pointed a little deeper or allowed me to see it a little deeper, feel into it. So you can call it an internal place, but as you go deeper, you realize that there is no internal, there's no external. This is another perception of space and points in space that we will eventually see through as we go deeper in meditation. We experience we experience the reality of no boundaries, right? Now that just sounds like gobbledygook to a lot of people. Well, of course there's a me here, I'm solid, I'm real, and of course there's a computer, of course there's something out there. Yeah, that's what it appears to be in this relative world, and it works. It's quite helpful to have those boundaries. But as we go deeper in meditation, those boundaries dissolve and we realize that there are no, and physics, science proves this, there are no boundaries between this body and the space that it inhabits. Okay, there's just, the first level, there's elements arising and ceasing, earth, air, water, fire. At a deeper level, there's atoms and molecules. At a deeper level, it's all just empty space. So when I say go to the still point or rest in awareness, the first thing people do, because this is the way the mind's conditioned, is that we create a perception that there's something in here of me, and we'll call it it's called the still point or awareness. And so what I do is concretize it. I what's the word? I kind of fabricate it through the perceptual process again. And that's okay. We have, that happens. Just recognize I'm still working at a conceptual level with this notion of stillness or awareness. But as you go deeper, you realize that the still point, open awareness, the self, what else? The supreme reality is not a place. It's not a thing that one cultivates, because it's beyond all of those limitations, and it's also beyond cultivation. I guess what we're doing is just shedding the veils that block the awareness of what's already there, okay? And when we arrive at what's already there, we realize, oh, I don't have to cultivate it. I don't have to keep making it. It's just seeing. It's just seeing through the falsities, the layers of conditioning, the false perceptions. And then it's just a matter of resting. And there's not even anyone who rests. See, this is whenever we use words, we're always kind of it's not really speaking the truth. It's just kind of attempting to point to something. And then that's why you might listen to some of the teachers and think they're full of contradictions. They can't. And at one level they are, because language is contradictory. And they might also just use a particular paradigm for one person because they realize they get it, and another for another person in a different time. And it's just like they're just contradicting themselves. So all of this is to say, let go of words or trying to figure out what an internal place or cultivation might be. To close this, and just rest beyond the words if you can. Rightio, where are we up to? What similarities have Christian mysticism and Buddhism what similarities have I experienced? That's a big question. I would say it's better if you go and listen to some Christian mysticism, if you're a Buddhist or practicing Buddhist, or vice versa, and see what similarities you recognize. Because there's so many similarities, and there are also a number of apparent differences, particularly obviously in language and frameworks and the main teacher. But is there I'll just try and point to perhaps one key similarity that would stand out for me. And it depends which Christian mystic you listen to too. Because if you're talking about Meister Eckhart as opposed to St. John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila, I think one thing that really struck me, I suppose, would be that those powerful Christian mystics are always pointing to the need to drop all concepts, forms, and notions of God. That God is not a concept. God is not a thing. That God is the unspeakable reality that can only be known by direct experience. And this is what the Buddha always said. Talk about Nibbana. He didn't use God as a notion. But he didn't also say he didn't believe in God. He just didn't have that as part of his paradigm. But he said to experience ultimate reality, the ending of all suffering, Nibbana. So Nibbana just simply means a going out, a cooling, a letting go of ignorance, craving, aversion. To know that, it has to be a direct experience. So I think both of them would always say it's not an intellectual activity. If you get lost in philosophies, comparing things, arguing, you're really going well on the wrong path. We have to drop all those notions and be silent. Stop, as the Buddha would say. The Christians would say, rest in the stillness of God, the silence of God. Okay, so Tristan says, hi, Tristan here. I've watched a neuroscientist explain how they've found consciousness in the brainstem, not the cortex. Not a question, just interesting how it correlates with meditation. I'm not sure it does. They're looking at a microscope. They're not looking at their own consciousness. And consciousness is not a thing that one can find. You can find reflections of consciousness, activities in consciousness, but consciousness itself will never be found because it's not a thing. Okay. Oh, we've lost it. This chat thing, I put my mouse on it and it just goes vroom. So I have to go back now. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Okay, so I'm up to Les yeux reloaded. You're welcome. I am camping. I have a generator next to me. but it disappeared during the meditation. I fell into a level of almost sleep, but I heard you the whole time and felt the wind and heard the birds. Lovely. Enjoy your camping. I hope you're safe and warm. So Amanda says, in the meditation, stillness was experienced more like a place of spaciousness rather than a point. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for raising that. Again, it's the problems of words. Sometimes it can feel, that's the other thing, and things shift. Sometimes when you feel a sense of stillness, everything kind of dissolves and opens up, and it's like you're the whole room. There's no boundaries, like I was saying before. And there's a kind of awareness seems to expand, very expansive awareness. So you couldn't even find a point if you wanted to. Other times, there's an awareness of that spaciousness, but there seems to be, this is just talking from my experience too, and I'm sure others can relate, there seems to be, and again, it's a perception, of course, there seems to be a kind of a rock-like stillness that you rest in, even though you recognize it's not locatable. It is spaciousness itself, but it has the perceptual, intuitive sense of being contained. I don't know. It's really hard to put into words, and one can just experience different manifestations of it, if you like, from time to time. Like I said, it's consciousness manifesting in different ways. So even when something feels like a spaciousness, remember, it's still a very subtle perception. And even when it feels like a still point, and you're not making it happen, but it's still a perception. Okay, so that if you were to explain it, you say, well, there was a sense of just being really still, light, empty, peaceful. But that's using words, and it's sharing a subtle perceptual experience of pure consciousness reflecting itself, or awareness, if you like that, prefer that word. Okay, so I hope that helped, Amanda. And then sometimes you might feel like, it's all gathered together in a point. This is what's called samadhi too, unification of mind. So when the mind is unified, sometimes it can feel like a coming in and it's not going to move, right? Other times it's unified, but it goes out. I know, for all you science boffins out there might be some parallels that you can relate to with that in terms of the planets and stars, sucked into a black hole. Everything disappears, perceptions, or just expanded into space. Nothing that you can hold on to. Sounds scary for some people, but when you really let go into it, it's very peaceful and releasing, and it's showing you what reality is at the deepest levels. Okay. So Alex is asking, can you please point to some resources for guided meditations based on Mahasatipatthana Sutta? I don't know guided meditations on the Satipatthana Sutta. I read the Satipatthana on my channel. I know who's given some guided meditations, and you might be able to find them on YouTube. And that's Ajahn Analio. Yeah, he does a lot of guided meditations. Oh, this has come to me on the Satipatthana Sutta. So Analio is Analay, Analio. Alex, what I'll do is put a link at the end of this session sometime in the comments to his meditations, and they're very powerful, very Theravadan based, but very clear, very piercing. So I'll put a link to where you might be able to find Venerable Analio's meditations. Okay, so Jay has shared a quote there from Gurdjieff. Eve, stillness has become a way of listening with body. However, there is a feeling in the body like a current running along the edges of the body, but sometimes inside too, a very active current, normal. Is it normal? Yes, nothing's normal and everything's normal. So whatever happens, happens. Everyone's different. Yes, sometimes it can feel like a current of energy, inside, outside, no edges, no inside, no outside. So there's no guidebook here. It's not prescriptive that this is going to happen. It's like this is the wonder. This is the mystery of life. Is that anything and everything can happen, and everyone is different. So don't go looking for something or worrying whether it's normal or abnormal, because nothing is. I'm just going to turn my heater off. The sun's coming up. Okay. Just a few more questions because we're getting to the end and my battery's getting low. I was also curious, says Andre, about the scope of observation in mindfulness practice. There are times I can sense a background stillness, but not often does it pervade the entire area within and without the body. I'm not sure I understand your question in terms of the scope. I don't know what sort of mindfulness, there's so many forms of mindfulness practice out there these days, isn't there? So I'm not sure what the practice that you're doing is encouraging you to look at, or whether it's just asking you to focus on specific objects. I guess the thing that I was encouraging in that meditation was just to open up to recognizing a wider spaciousness and silence, rather than pinpointing on a more kind of dualistic practice, as they say. It's a good thing to do, is to notice the stillness, because it's always there. Okay. I'll just skip yours, born in washing machine, because other people have asked questions, and I need to, share the questions, if that's all right. I'm looking for other questions before we finish up. What role can the inner imaginal work with elements play in meditation? Lots, I guess. If you're into visualizations, I suppose you're talking about, within the Tibetan tradition, they use a lot of visualizations. So I'm not the best person to ask about that. I don't tend to use visualizations or imaginal work. I tend to just let the imaginations come and go. But for some people, again, it depends on your proclivities and what works for you. It can be very helpful. And you're saying imaginal work with elements. Do you mean the elements of earth, water, and fire? Certainly when you're doing an element meditation, and there, again, not wanting to plug my channel, but you're here, so whatever. I've done an elements guided meditation. So in that, you would be imagining to some extent the element of earth as it manifests in the body, the element of fire, air, and so on. And this is a really good practice, actually, for noticing how the body is comprised of elements, because we often don't even go that deep. We just think we're a body, and we're a good body or a bad body, a beautiful body or not. But when we look at our bodies at the elemental level, and we would use the imagination, it can be very powerful for uprooting this sense of a fixed, solid identity of a body that we carry around from, with a social, cultural perception of beautiful or not beautiful, right or not right. So I hope that answers some where you're coming from, because I think that's where you're coming from. You're welcome, Michelle Shave. I'm glad it was helpful. What is a thought, says Bloom. I ask you the same question. What is a thought? Have you looked at a thought? Have a thought now, Bloom. Have a thought. What is it? There's a few things you could say. I assume you're saying it to yourself. Say it to you. You could start off by saying it's a kind of an energetic movement somewhere. We think it's happening here. It's a firing of a neuron. But when you go deeper, what is a thought? And we were going to do a thoughts meditation. Maybe I'll try and remember to do it next time. You know, it's nothing. But, you know, it's thoughts that drive this world, and people attach and believe them as being a thing, as being true, as being who and what I am. But if you just hold that, it's a good inquiry for everyone's meditation. What is a thought? And then just start looking at them. And then I would also say, who's the thinker? Where is the thinker? Bet you can't find anything. Okay, so someone's on my Spotify channel. That's great. I have put stuff on Spotify because people probably like going there without all the busyness of YouTube. Okay, I'm going to have to wind up now. Zara, you've asked a question on dealing with anxiety. It's a big question, and some of what I've said today already may help you. But if you're looking for more resources, Jitindra has done a series that you can find on our website, vivekahermitage.com. And there's a series under the guided meditations called, just thinking, compassionate awareness. So all of those guided meditations and teachings that she offers there, I dare say would help you with this question and ways to work with it skillfully, whether it's anxiety, fear, depression, worry. Please go on and hopefully some of those will be of help. I'm sure they will be to you. One last question, and then I'm going to have to apologize in advance for not being able to get through them all. Someone's asked, when we reach a state of stillness, will wisdom come to us naturally? It's a good question. At one level, yes. At another level, it depends. You know, I've said that things happen without you doing anything, and that's true at one level. At another level, if you just go into a state of stillness and zone out, or attach to the stillness because you like it so much and decide, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm just going to stay in this stillness, and then I want to just meditate more and more in the stillness, and then I'm going to die in the stillness, and you'll just stay in stillness with no wisdom. So wisdom has to come to the fore. So the point of stillness is to use it, I suppose, as a springboard into insight and wisdom. Because when the mind is still, it's a bit like a body of water, a lake. When all the ripples and the waves and the wind on the lake finally settles, you can see deep, clear into the lake. And that's the point of stillness. It's not just to stay stuck in the stillness, because if you do that, you won't progress in meditation. You'll just be a stillness junkie, a bliss junkie. And I wouldn't recommend it. So when the lake is still, we look. But I guess there has to be some interest. There has to be interest, investigation, to look within. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to look within, because if there's wisdom, wisdom will know how to look, what to look. And it's not, I just want to clarify for people if they're kind of jumping ahead. You don't get to a place of stillness and then start having a big intellectual, philosophical discussion, internal discussion, trying to figure everything out about reality. It's well beyond the mind and the conceptual level of understanding. And it is natural, inherent to us. But I guess the ingredients that the Buddha taught need to be there. These are what are called the factors of enlightenment. Some of the key ingredients are investigation and interest. So we'll say that concentration's there now because you're in a state of stillness. But without investigation, inquiry, interest, this is why Ramana Maharshi always emphasized inquiry, because he could bliss out in stillness forever and a day if he wanted to. But he didn't just teach that. He said, you've got to inquire. For him, it was keep asking, who is this I? Nisargadatta's the same. Always cutting through. Look at the consciousness, don't just get stuck as a bliss head. Keep inquiring into the nature of the self. But when I say that, there's no method or script for what your own wisdom will allow you to investigate. It'll happen, that part will happen naturally if there's enough inquiry and interest. So sometimes a bit of reading the scriptures can help do that, because it's pointing us to, look at the element. And I start to look at the elements, the mind will naturally want to know, because I guess the wisdom, so this is the last point, not to just compound you with all this, but if there's enough wisdom, it will recognize that stillness and peace is not the final goal, right? At one level. At another level it is. But if it's just a stillness where the mind is blanking out, zoning out, and attaching to it, wisdom will know that this stillness, if it's based on particularly a subtle clinging and perception of me, that there's still a me enjoying, an I enjoying the stillness, identified with the stillness, then wisdom will come and say, this, cut through it, have a look, go deeper. Okay. And for that to happen, there has to be interest and motivation. And it reminds me of Nagarjuna's famous saying on this, and I'll end it here now. He said, emptiness, I'm not going to be able to remember this quote by quote, so don't quote me on it, but it's something like this. Emptiness has the power to liberate, but for whom emptiness is merely a concept, there will be no liberation. So that's kind of pointing to it. If it's just, and when I say a concept, you may think that you've gone beyond concepts and you're just in a stillness state, but it can still be a very subtle sense of me there as stillness, enjoying it. And we're still conceptualizing emptiness or stillness. So it's not liberating. That's what I'm trying to say. The true liberating emptiness comes well beyond the conceptual, even the very subtle conceptual states, the fine jhanic states. That's why people can get stuck in them, because they don't recognize that there's still states of impermanence. Anyway, that's getting probably a little bit way and beyond for most people, but I just thought I'd mention it. Oakley dokley, it's 8:45 here, and my battery is about to expire. So I'm going to leave it there, and I've got one task to do, and that's to put on Venerable Analio's link for Alex, I think it was, who asked. So I'll do that in the next couple of hours. So people, take care, and I hope today's stream was helpful for everyone. Thank you for coming, for supporting one another, for asking questions, for looking, for sharing. And Ayajitindra will see you in a fortnight. And then the fortnight after that will be the Buddha Dharma series. So I'm not going anywhere. The perceptions are about to change, and I'm still in this room. Even if this room changes, I'm still not going anywhere, and neither are you. It's just changing perceptions. So take care, and see you again sometime. Bye.